The reason those who would try to control you will ultimately destroy themselves is those people have done nothing but recruited and trained all those people on the other side of the battlefield. What's up, folks? This is Justin Garcia, also known as Master Chim, and welcome to another TRIBALNOMICS video. If you would do me a favor and like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, all that stuff, you guys know the game we're playing here. Today I wanted to talk about why the left, the progressive, super liberal, I am going to destroy the world because it'll make me feel better type of left I'm referring to, why those people ultimately will lose. It's inevitable. You're starting to see some of that sort of manifest itself in society as it is now. So let's start off talking about what a tyrant is, right? And a lot of these people are tyrants, and it's not a word that many people would use instinctively, because tyrants are usually, associated, I think, commonly with strength, power, and like being bullies and whatnot. But I think it's a little bit more commonplace and a little bit more formulaic in that it rears its head in many different areas of our lives. So a tyrant, let's start off with the definition of a tyrant. A tyrant is somebody who invalidates the identity of others, okay? A tyrant invalidates the identity of others. So what that means is he or she is somebody, the tyrant is somebody who walks around basically pursuing their own mission and only sees others as a reflection of their mission, right? So if I am somebody who needs to go across town and I want to rent a cab driver, I look at that cab driver only as the process, the tool that I will use to get to where I need to go. What his name is, what his struggles are, his family struggles, anything that's going on with him that makes him him, I completely ignore. I could try and sort of destroy it in some cases, not necessarily the cab driver, but you'll have times where, a tyrant will try and what's called eliminate the offset between the two individuals. So what that means is, if you guys have ever used Play-Doh, right? I've got 4 kids. Play-Doh is, a part of this home and has been for some time. And one of the things you'll see with Play-Doh is they'll have these shapes, all right? And these shapes will allow you to sort of push into the Play-Doh, revealing the shape that's underneath, right? And the shape is obviously the shape of the mold that you're putting on top of it. And whenever you put the mold on top of the Play-Doh, there's all that excess around the mold that if we want a perfectly molded shape, we will sort of tear away all of that excess on the outside. Well, what a tyrant does is he or she looks at you as what you need to be and what you will look like perfectly molded. Now, what is going to fit within that mold, using the TRIBALNOMICS language, we call the overlap. Anything else about you that doesn't have to do with that overlap, we refer to as the offset, right? So tyrants sever the offset of an individual's identity when dealing with them, right? So let's get back to, well, why is it that these people who are, tyrants that we're seeing in society now, why will they ultimately be their own undoing? Well, here's another thing about tyrants. Tyrants create traitors, right? Tyrants are traitor machines. And what that means is, because a tyrant refuses to acknowledge the entirety of others' individual identities, ultimately, they will force the person who they are being tyrants to, they will force them to either betray them, right, by deceiving the tyrant, by lying to the tyrant, telling the tyrant what he wants to hear, and ultimately doing what he wants to do, or he will force these people to betray themselves. By betraying themselves, what winds up happening is these people become lesser versions of themselves, and they themselves, because of the weakness, of that individual, they will allow the tyrant to sort of shrink them, reduce them to the overlap. In other words, they will try to sever their own offset, right, in their alliance with that tyrant. So when we're seeing politically these people who they haven't figured out what everybody else is supposed to be doing in life, when we look at these people and how they conduct themselves, there is no room for negotiating an alliance between two identities. No, they are like molds walking around and telling you who you need to be. Now, there are going to be plenty of people in a society like this, which is the weakest in the history of man, I would argue, who are going to sever their own identities. These are the people who are the whole get woke crowd. These are the people who, I'd rather, you know what, let's just use the pronouns. Let's just do these things because I don't want any trouble. Because we know when we look at these corporate, entities, they don't truly have empathy for anybody. This isn't something that's inherent in what a corporation is. They don't care about these people and these people's struggles. No, it's all just a decision they're making to sort of kowtow to this pressure because they just want to maintain that alliance, right? Why? Because the overlap is where they make their money, right? It's where they get what they want. So you have these people in society. The traitors to these tyrants are the corporations and business interests who are deceiving the tyrants, telling them what they want to hear, because ultimately they want what they want. And then you have the virtue signaling, weak, sort of lukewarm, malleable, population, the people in society who are all too easily changed, all too easily, told what to do. And those are the people who will reduce their own offset just because they think it's the moral thing to do, or it's really just they have such an aversion to pressure. They're so vulnerable to pressure and conflict that it's always going to be a good idea in their mind. Well, let me just, if I do this, we're going to argue and they're going to be mad at me. So you know what? I just won't do that. And that's the sum total of the formula when they're dealing with these things. The tyrants, they consider themselves to be the mission that matters. Anything they feel is what everybody should abide by. And this is another reason why they'll be their own undoing. They run their formulas very emotionally driven, which means they're going to be one person on Monday. They may be a completely different person on Tuesday based on their mood and their emotions. And so when you see these people, even if you had people who legitimately, authentically wanted to follow them, wanted to agree with them, there's not enough certainty in who these people portray themselves to be for somebody to build a valid, significant alliance with them. The tyrants, are people who they walk around always looking for people who are going to have the overlap that allows them to become tools to the tyrant. I used the analogy, right, of the cab driver earlier. And the analogy was, well, to me, his name could be Harry. He could come from, England, and he could have a son that's sick and a wife who he loves tremendously. To me, he is cab driver. That's all he is. If I am a tyrant, when Harry tells me, yeah, I got a boy that's sick in the hospital, the tyrant may say, like, listen, I don't give a shit about any of that. Like, just drive me to where I need to go. That is how their formulas interact with people who are offset from them. So you'll have people who, we call, let's use the cab driver to continue with that for a sec, we call them professional. And what are these people who we say, oh, he's acting professionally? Well, a professional is somebody who, in the role of his profession, actually reduces or eliminates the offset while he is doing that. But it is understood to be something that is short-term, that is based on the alliance of that person's profession. Maybe it's Harry the cab driver knowing people are going to be uncomfortable if I'm telling them all my problems while they're looking to take a cab ride. So I'm going to be whoever they need me to be because that's going to maximize my mission to make money driving my cab. I think you could see the dynamics I'm trying to describe here. So we see tyrants in many different areas of life. Obviously, the latest, greatest, the one that was the motivation for me making this video, were all those people on the left right now who can't take accountability for bad decisions they've made, for bad advice they've given, for bad positions that they're maintaining. They're doubling, tripling, quadrupling down, and they can't let themselves sort of just let those things go because it would undermine how they look at the world in the first place. So these people eventually will, there'll be a reckoning. Reality will eventually catch up to them. The universe will have its balance. And it's going to be varying degrees of uncomfortable for these people when that happens to them individually over the course of time, but it's inevitable, right? The tyrants that we see there, what are other types of tyrants? Just to draw a little, comparison. So you see this isn't a one-off thing. This is really like a formula, a bad formula that leaders really try and run, allies try and run. You see it in dads, right? Dads who crush their kids. Dads who, because of their own insecurities, they make sure that there's never a situation with their children where they can expose what they perceive to be vulnerabilities, right? I'm never going to look vulnerable. I'm never going to look imperfect, really, to my children, and I will make sure that I will reduce them to accommodate that dynamic that I want to design. And it's a very selfish formula for a parent to run. But over the years of my coaching business, it's one of the things I've really had to correct with a lot of my coaching students. They were the dads who were, my son doesn't want to go play football. Why not? Because he doesn't like it, he tells me. And then after a little bit of poking around, I find out that football practice is the only place the dad yells at the son. Everywhere else, the dad's a regular dad, a regular supportive dad. But for some reason, because of all the pressure that the dad has, placed on his son, the son goes, I don't want to go there. He doesn't come to this conclusion consciously, but he's telling himself, unconsciously, why would I want to go there? That's the place where dad yells at me, right? So it makes sense why that formula wouldn't work there. And we see that play itself out all the time. I always tell parents, dads specifically, most of my coaching students, or I should say, I don't have mothers as coaching students. When I'm talking about this, I'm talking to fathers. I'm telling them, like, listen, it's your job to build your child up. It's your child to make sure that their identity grows. You're the gardener. You are growing, this seed to turn into a powerful tree one day. Like, you need to do the thing that makes it grow. It has nothing to do with you. It's not about you. It's about them. It's sort of the idea, right? Another instance where you'll see these tyrants are the bosses, the tyrannical bosses. They're the ones who they lead according to mood, right? According to their mental state. It's like, oh, is the supervisor in? Yeah, he's in a bad mood today. Oh, it's going to be one of those days. What is the opposite? To look at it from the opposite angle, what's a good, effective boss, in a workplace? Somebody who has such an understanding of what the mission is that they don't allow their individual moods to affect that. Because a good boss, they themselves will see their mood as offset in the alliance they have with the employees. If I'm the boss, I go into work, it's not their job to deal with my bad mood. If something happened to me on the way to work or something like that, it's not their job to deal with that. That shouldn't affect their day. That's not why they're here. That's not why I'm here, right? Certainly not the condition that we built the alliance under, right? So this is why those people, those tyrants that we're seeing in society today, will be their own undoing, right? They don't understand that not validating, or trying to invalidate people who they disagree with ultimately is going to be untenable, right? There's no way you could sustain alliances with people who you refuse to acknowledge as having valid opinions and positions of their own. Everybody's allowed to have their own opinions, right? But when it comes down to how is it that we're going to build an alliance, we negotiate our offsets to create a scenario or a dynamic, an agreement where we can maximize the overlap to create the synergy that is sort of the purpose for any alliance, from the onset, right? So I hope that made sense. Do me a favor, if you enjoyed this, like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, share it if you think somebody needs to hear this message. But I'm somebody who, I firmly believe in allowing formulas to sort of create a code for an individual to sort of protect them from these mood swings and different mental states and influences from the ne'er-do-wells, right? But hope you enjoyed it. Go to TRIBALNOMICS.com, check out the book if you haven't already, and I'll talk to you guys soon.